What's going on, everyone? My name's Obi and welcome back to Courtside Financial. Today's November 4th, 2025. And boy, do I have a show for you today. You know what's fascinating? We spend so much time talking about the scoreboard, delivery numbers, production numbers, stock prices, all of that jazz. But today we're going beyond the scoreboard. Today we're talking about the real game. What happens when you take your championship team on the road? What does it actually take to win when you're playing in someone else's arena? Let me set the stage with a theme that's been burning on my mind. The paradox of going global. Because here's the thing, the Chinese EV market is hitting 60% penetration. The domestic market is basically a mosh pit at this point. So for ambitious players, going global isn't optional anymore. It's survival. But here's the thing, the same advantages that make you dominant at home might mean nothing when you're talking about going overseas. Today we're talking about 4 stories that literally paint this picture. NIO's executive team driving across Europe to what happens when the world's biggest EV maker tries to sell their EVs in a market where EVs have literally, wait for it guys, 1% penetration. 1.7% penetration. Plus, we'll break down why Chinese automakers are burning through billions of dollars of tax subsidies domestically. And lastly, what XPeng's Robotaxi reveal tells us about where the industry is headed. So buckle up, everyone. This is Tuesday. This is Courtside Financial. Let's start with what caught my eye today. First story of the day, NIO CEO William Li. He is the founder and the chairman as well, posted on Weibo that he's in Europe about to drive a Firefly from Amsterdam to Oslo, a 4-hour journey. And he said something interesting. Firefly is such a pleasure to drive that everyone wants to be the driver. I snagged the wheel first. Now, on the surface, that's just good CEO marketing, right? Test the product, show confidence, post it on social media. But look who's in that back seat. Daniel Jin, Firefly's president, and Stanley Q, NIO's CFO, who also runs NIO Power. This isn't just a casual road trip, folks. This is a strategic mission. And here's what makes it fascinating. Firefly delivered 5,912 units in October, contributing to NIO's record-breaking 4,397 total deliveries. So that's the 3rd consecutive month that Firefly has broken its own record. The brand is working. But let me give you some context that makes this trip meaningful. Firefly originally entered Europe back in August with early deliveries in the Netherlands and Norway on August 14th. And get this, NIO originally planned to launch Firefly in August 1st, but they only pivoted to China first because of those pesky EU tariffs. So now 3 months later, after the European launch, the executive team is on the ground. They're not just checking boxes, they're implementing what NIO calls flexible strategies through a distributor model. And they've got plans to enter 6 more countries: Belgium, Denmark, Austria, Portugal, Hungary, and Greece. Here's my take. This tells you everything about how NIO views international expansion. It's not set it and forget it. It's not ship the cars and count cash. It's hands-on, it's iterative, and it requires the C-suite to be boots on the ground at times. Feeling the roads, understanding the infrastructure, talking to the distributors. That's the grown-up version of going global. Now let's talk about what going global actually looks like. And to do this, we're going to look at Japan again today. BYD, the world's #1 seller of energy vehicles, they've been in Japan since July 2022. More than 3 years now, but you know how many cars they sold? Just over 7,000 vehicles. That's less than an hour of orders during a flash sale back in China. But before you write them off, let me give you BYD's growth story. January to September 25, BYD sold 2,899 vehicles. That's a 66% year-over-year increase for Japan. In September alone, they broke 800 units for the first time. And here's the kicker, BYD's new energy vehicle sales in Japan have already surpassed Toyota's EV. They're also the leading brand in the Japanese electric bus market. Well, let me paint the picture for you of what BYD is actually up against, because this is where things get real. Japan's EV penetration rate in September 2025 is 1.7%, not 17%, 1.7%. To put that in perspective, China was at 1.8% in 2016, and it took 4 more years before they truly exploded in 2020. Japan is basically where China was almost a decade ago. Let's talk about the infrastructure. Greater Tokyo has 37 million people. They've only got 13,000 charging stations. And let's talk about the core 23 wards. 3 to 4,000. Meanwhile, Shenzhen, which is roughly the same size, has over 420,000 charging piles. So the gap isn't incremental, it's exponential. And let's talk about the competition. In 2024, Japan sold 4.42 million cars. Domestic brands took 95% of that. Mercedes, BMW, Volkswagen, BYD, they shared the remaining 5%. So that's the definition of a closed ecosystem. Now here's where the story gets personal and instructive. There's a BYD owner in Japan, Mr. Wei Xing, an engineer in his 40s who bought a Dolphin in June 2024. This guy drove a 50-year-old Fiat before this. And when he told his Japanese friends he was buying a BYD, most of them have never even heard of that brand. When he tried to rent a temporary parking space, the attendant literally refused, asking, "Is this a Chinese electric vehicle? Isn't there a risk of it catching on fire?" So that's not a market penetration problem. That's a trust deficit. And you can't fix that with a press release or a Super Bowl ad. You fix it by doing what BYD's doing. Opening physical 4S stores with actual showrooms and after-sales service. Something like Tesla's direct sales model doesn't provide in Japan. You fix it by pricing competitively. The BYD Atto 3 starts at 4.18 million yen, roughly 193,000 rent, which is comparable to a Toyota RAV4. And you fix it by understanding who your customer actually is. In Japan, the main EV buyers aren't tech-savvy urbanites in fancy apartments. It's middle-aged families in their 40s and 50s living in detached houses with dedicated parking where they can install home chargers. BYD figured that out. They adapted. Liu Zuleng, BYD's general manager for Asia Pacific auto sales, said something profound. When they entered Japan, they didn't set aggressive sales targets because, in his words, we knew they wouldn't be too high. Instead, their focus was on building a network of 100 dealerships by the end of 2025, and they'll probably hit around 80, he said. That's already quite good. That's the humility of going global. BYD, a company who dominates in China, has to be a student in Japan. And frankly, that's the only way that this works. Alright, so let's go back to China, because while companies are grinding it out overseas, there's chaos at home for these Chinese electric vehicle manufacturers. Here's the situation. China's tax exemption for EVs is ending. Starting January 1st, 2026, instead of getting the full exemption, the tax exemption actually gets cut in half with a maximum subsidy of 15,000 ren. And automakers, they're in panic mode, spending billions of ren to cover the gap for their customers. NIO was actually one of the first to announce a purchase tax guarantee. After the new ES8 launched at NIO Day in September, they promised order before December 31st, and even if your car delivers in 2026, NIO covers the tax difference up to 15,000 ren. Why? Because William Li admitted that 2025's production capacity of over 40,000 units was already sold out. They had to offer that guarantee or risk order cancellation. NIO's not alone though. Zeekr launched the 9X with a purchase tax program, and during the National Day holiday, store traffic jumped 200%, with half of that traffic specifically for the 9X. Average pre-orders per store were 65 vehicles. Conversion rate was 40%, and the delivery cycle was 26 weeks. Ido's M7, well, during the National Day holiday, 70% of showroom visitors looked at it first. The M7 alone received more than double the orders of the second place ZGR7. Ido averaged nearly 6,000 new orders per day during the holiday. 50,000 total orders across the entire period. But here's where it gets expensive. Xiaomi with the SU7 and the YU7 is subsidizing 11,000 to 14,000 ren per vehicle, considering their production capacity and delivery ambitions. Xiaomi will likely pay over 2 billion ren in additional costs for 2026 due to this subsidy. For NIO's new ES8, That 15,000 rand subsidy per vehicle could eat up to 3% of gross profit margin. These aren't trivial numbers. These are strategic bets. Meanwhile, BYD, they're not offering purchase subsidies at all. The sales guy in Beijing literally said, we have cars in stock. You could drive away today, invoice this year, and get the full tax break. That's the power of scale and operational efficiency when your supply chain is tight and you don't need to subsidize because you can actually deliver. But here's my synthesis. This scramble isn't just about hitting Q4 targets. It's about something deeper. Companies are fighting for momentum. A survey showed that 77% of consumers think that the purchase tax incentive is the #1 factor driving dealership visits. So in other words, if you don't subsidize, you lose the customer entirely. If you do subsidize, you're buying loyalty and market share at a steep discount to your margin. It's a prisoner's game and everyone's defecting, but the winners will be the ones who can afford to play this game without breaking their balance sheet. Now let's zoom out and talk about where all of this is actually heading, because XPeng gave us a preview. Tomorrow, which is November 5th, XPeng will be holding their AI day, and they just gave us a sneak peek of their Robotaxi. But this isn't just another autonomous vehicle though. XPeng is saying that their Robotaxi is no longer a means of transportation, but a companion that understands communication. They released a video showing a Robotaxi based on the X9 MPV with displays on the back of both sun visors, serving as the core interface for human-vehicle interaction. These displays show greetings, task status, charging status. The Robotaxi can interact with passengers and pedestrians, like stopping to let someone cross the street. So this builds on what XPeng released at last year's AI Day. The Shanghai platform, an AI automotive neural system designed for level 4 autonomous driving. They said they'd use their in-house Turing smart driving chip to create Robotaxis with up to 3,000 TOPS of computing power. So here's why this matters. XPeng started exploring Robotaxis back in 2022 when their G9 got approval for public road testing in Guangzhou, China. But they've become relatively quiet since then. Until now, that is. And the timing is interesting. When everyone's fighting over international market share and purchase tax subsidies, XPeng is saying kind of what Tesla's saying. The game is changing, and the product isn't just cars anymore. It's AI-powered mobility services. That's the long game, because if Robotaxis actually scale, and that's a big if, the entire business model shifts. You're not selling cars to individuals anymore. You're operating fleets and selling rides. The margins are different. The capital requirements are different. And of course, the competitive moats are different. All right, let me bring this home, because these 4 different stories are really just all the same story with different chapters. Chapter 1 is about NIO's leadership physically driving across Europe, understanding that international expansion requires executive level commitment and on the ground adaptation. Chapter 2 is about BYD learning humility in Japan, accepting that being #1 globally doesn't entitle you to instant success in a market with 95% domestic brand loyalty and a massive trust deficit. Chapter 3 is about the domestic battlefield, where companies are spending billions on purchase tax subsidies just to maintain momentum through a policy transition. A calculated bet that 2026 market share is worth the 2025 margin hit. Chapter 4 is about XPeng betting that the entire game is about to change, that autonomy and AI will redefine what a car company even is. So what's the thesis? Going global is not about exporting your domestic playbook. It's about earning trust in markets where you have none, while simultaneously defending your home turf from competitors who are subsidizing their way into customers' driveways, all while the definition of the entire industry is being rewritten by AI and autonomy. That's not even a challenge, guys. That's a triathlon. And for NIO specifically, look, I'm bullish. You all know that. But being bullish doesn't mean I'm blind. NIO delivered 40,397 vehicles in October. That's great. That's a record. Firefly is growing every month. The executive team is in Europe, boots on the ground. They're covering purchase taxes to protect their customers and their pipeline. But the real test is, are they going to be able to scale this thing called Firefly? And if they do scale it, are they going to be able to do so without cannibalizing the NIO brand? Can they expand in Europe while navigating tariffs and then also building a distributor network? Can they maintain margins while subsidizing taxes? Can they deliver on the 2026 production targets that they've essentially pre-sold? Those are execution questions, not strategy questions. And execution is where champions are made. All right, everyone. Happy Tuesday. That's the show. If you found this informative, useful, insightful, at the very least entertaining, Make sure you share the video, click the notification bell icon, leave a comment down below, smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next installment. This is Obi with the Courtside Financial podcast, signing off. Thank you for tuning in. Goodbye.